Hello everybody, this is Gregory with How I Lost Over 100 Pounds and have kept it off for 30 plus years, where there should be no hesitancy in your weight loss and maintenance. Today we're going to go down the road of childhood trauma and talk about talking to your parents. Now, before we begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. Also check out my website, which has hundreds of articles and recipes, my 2 books on Amazon. If you like podcasts, I have on Apple and Spotify, The Awakened Man, and also The Cinema Rag, which has to do with movies. Lastly, if you appreciate my content, there is a link for PayPal. Now, I've talked about before that a lot of weight gain stems from childhood trauma, because that's where you typically get the disordered relationship with food. As I've mentioned ad nauseum, I think my dog is still back there. Yeah, he is. Dogs eat when they're hungry and then they walk away from the food. And most people who are overweight, including myself when I was younger, we didn't do that, right? We ate to numb the pain, to soothe the pain, to fill us, to give us something that we weren't getting from our parents or from somebody else. And food doesn't talk back to you, food doesn't yell at you, food doesn't berate you, food gives you nurturance. So a lot of people who end up being overweight is because of something that fractured in their childhood, ECT, early childhood trauma. And with me, I've talked about it quite a bit. If you're new to this channel, definitely go to the playlist called Confessions of an Obese Child. It's, I think, 20 episodes about what it was like when I was a fat teenager and child. And so one of the ways to heal that, and I talk about like if you want to get an ordered relationship with food when you are like the dog or like a 4-year-old where you just eat when you're hungry and you don't eat until you're bloated and you don't attach emotions to food, you have to do the deep work and address this childhood trauma. And one of the ways to address this childhood trauma is talk to your parents. So if you feel, and it could be just or unjust, if you feel that your parents led you or caused you to become overweight and you're harboring some sort of resentment or anger about it, then you need to address it with them for a couple reasons. One, they could die at any moment. They're probably older than you, and so you don't know the time or the hour, as Christ says, and so you just can't take for granted that they're always going to be there for when you're ready to finally talk to them and tell them you love them and all these things. But two, more importantly, part of doing that deep work is addressing these issues with your parents. So I talked about it over at Confessions, how I did blame my parents, mostly my mother, because I would tell her, it's like, I'm 5 years old, I don't know what's good for me, so every time I ask for more ding-dongs, why'd you give them to me? Well, you would whine until I gave it to you. She had a very thick accent, so you would whine until you give it to me. And I'm like, I don't care if I'm whining, I'm 5, you should know it's better for me. So certainly in my adolescence, I had a lot of resentment toward my parents. And then it was kind of like that blame loser mentality, right? It's everybody's fault but my fault, as if they were holding me down and shoving food down my throat. And they weren't. So by the time I was in my 20s, which I'd lost my weight at that point, so go to the playlist on my post-weight loss called Revelations of a Weight Loss Warrior, I still harbored a lot of anger toward my parents, even though I was regular weighted, because I was trying to navigate this strange road of now I'm regular weighted, but I still have all this dysfunction from my childhood, and I still had dysfunctional eating. And so eventually, though, I got to the point where I was like, look, you had your own childhood trauma. My father, for example, his mother walked out on him, his brothers, and his father went on his 3rd birthday. So, he had his own childhood trauma, and he would just pass it down to us. It's intergenerational trauma that most families have, and so you need to break that thing. So I told him, it's like, I understand where you're coming from. That's why you drank so much alcohol, and that turned you into a Hyde, so to speak, and not a Jekyll. And I understand where you're coming from, and I forgive you. I know you weren't a perfect parent. I know you did the best you can. And I said that to both of my parents. And I think it's important to address that with your parents. And I think if you're at a certain part of your weight loss journey where you're still in that blame mode, it's understandable, but I would tell you that it needs to be a transient stage, and it can't be a stage you're in there for 15 to 20 years. Because anger, resentment, all these are poisons that we concoct that only we drink. So all these negative emotions, ultimately, vengeance, for example, are just wasted, and they end up corroding you. And in most cases, they don't even affect the other person, especially jealousy and envy and all this anger. They don't even know, so it's not even affecting them. So you reach a point where forgiveness is crucial. And if you are religious, Christ says it many times, and it's even in the Lord's Prayer. God won't forgive us if we don't forgive other people. And we are all flawed, and our parents are flawed too. And yes, I understand, maybe your parents did some egregious things to you. And ultimately, you want to get to the point where you address that with them. And look, you can forgive them and not necessarily forget what they did. And if they were truly toxic, you don't have to have them in your life, but you still want to have some sort of rapprochement, some sort of closure with them regarding this. And this is part of the process of doing the deep work. So you won't be part of that 80% of people who can lose 50 pounds, but they regain it. And I've talked about it here in several episodes. One of the reasons they regain it is because we can all crash diet. But to do long-term weight loss and weight maintenance, you got to do the deep work, and you can't have a disordered relationship with food. And a lot of that stems from childhood trauma, and a lot of that childhood trauma stems from parental dysfunction. And so to not have parental dysfunction, talk to your parents. And look, you might not get resolution from them. You might be, wishing like Pollyanna, like they're going to say, you know what, Bob, you're right. I did all these bad things. I'm so sorry. And maybe you will have parents who will say that upon introspection, but a lot of you won't get that kind of satisfaction. And that's not the goal of doing it. The goal is not to hear those words. The goal is to forgive them and to address it and then forgive them. Because ultimately it's going to make you better. It's going to make you feel better. And whether or not they apologize or don't apologize, again, it's one of those let go and let God. You don't need them to apologize, but for your own improvement, you need to address them. So that is one of the keys to have no longer that disordered relationship with food, and now you have an ordered relationship with food, is to undysfunctionalize, so to speak, your childhood, and try to have a more holistic, healthier view of your childhood, and that will help you with your relationship with food later on. Guys, post in the comments. Let me know if you've dealt with this or if you had this experience. Hit the notification, subscribe buttons, share with others. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.